it's not that our resources. And believe me, once we have parental autonomy, the entire geopolitical scene, inside and outside, is going to change. And it's not that there is anything, I have anything against, I'm inherently against the military. The reality is that you cannot but ignore the fact that it's a powerful institution, bureaucratic institution, which caters to its own interest, and therefore it does not allow for restructuring of the state, which would be much more responsive to the needs of the people.
Question, please.
Yes.
Save your statements.
No statement.
Speeches.
David, I wanted to address this to you, and maybe Ms. Ayesha can also add to it. Given the history of colonization, if you could summarize that history and help us understand the effects of that and what lessons we can learn, especially related to the psychology of the oppressor, the psychology of the colonizer, and how he gets the consent of the other people, white supremacy being part of it. And on the other hand, the psychology of the slave mentality, or what Tarkali calls the house Arab or house Pakistani, which, what Malcolm X calls the field Negro versus the house Negro. The psychology of if you could elaborate what you were talking about, the most dangerous thing in the hand of the...
Do you get it?
Well, there's a series of comments there. I don't know if you're all familiar with Malcolm X's famous comment about field Negro and house Negro. I don't need to explain that? Okay. I'm glad to be in an audience. Many times in U.S. audiences, American audiences, no one has a clue. They don't even know who Malcolm X is. And so, really, because we live in the USA, United States of Amnesia, there's no memory. There is very little knowledge of our own history, which is very interesting, by the way. Particularly when American political leaders lecture Pakistanis about their responsibilities and democracies and things like that. I don't want to overstress the role of colonialism and imperialism, but it's definitely a factor in the formation, not just of the Pakistani state, but of many other states. I think Frantz Fanon has written eloquently about this. Gramsci wrote about the need for director classes in subordinated countries which carry out the directives, literally, or the orders of the metropolitan state, whether it's the old colonial ruler or the now, independent state. So that has been part of the problem why the third world is the third world, because of the legacy of colonialism, because of the legacy of imperialism. This is not to exculpate or to excuse indigenous populations from their responsibility. It takes two to tango. One is not dancing by oneself. But having said that, we should really talk about how the greatest weapon in the hands of the oppressor. This is from Stephen Biko, the great apartheid leader in South Africa, who was murdered by the South African police in the mid-1960s. He said the greatest weapon in the hand of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. And just to echo something that Ayesha said about feudalism, you don't have to be a Zameen Dar to be a feudal, to be a Badera. You can be a shopkeeper. You can be a captain in the military. You can be a truck driver. You don't have to, have that. It's a particular attitude. And one of the ways that the West has ruled over the rest, as Hamid said, is to have cultivated a class of collaborators, I use that word advisedly, that have similar interests. They are brought to the metropolitan country, whether it's Cambridge and Oxford, or whether it's Harvard or Princeton, or whether it's the Sorbonne, whatever the mother colonial state was. You see those lines of connection still, even today. Why are the French intervening in West Africa? Because of their colonial domination of that region, and the fact that they have class interests, economic interests remaining from the days of imperialism. So I think it's important to recognize that, and in order to deconstruct it, and in order to liberate these countries from still semi-colonial status. Because as long as certain elements inside the countries are serving the interests of elites outside the country, the interests of the people, again, largely marginalized, are not served. So this is, I think, a very important an issue that needs to be brought into the daylight and discussed.
Right. Question?
Yeah, the question or speech is for David. You mentioned the support of the Shah in Iran and then the revolution. We just had an election and we had Mr. 10% back in Nawaz Sharif, the same old players. What are the odds of revolution in Pakistan? And especially, I don't think there is that much socialistic support over there. And I would like Ayesha to comment on the fact that these suicide bombings and all that, they do not happen, I think, without some tacit support of some people in the military. And what are the odds of some mullah types having a counter-revolution and bringing in that guard and getting rid of Musharraf types and really having a bad military government, worse government?
Very good. Good question.
The possibilities of revolution in Pakistan, I'm very hesitant to comment on that. It would require an enormous amount of knowledge and understanding of the various cultures and the various currents, political currents in the country. You can't go somewhere, this is what the Americans do. They go somewhere for 2-3 weeks and they come back, they're experts. They know everything about Somalia, they know everything about Mozambique. I don't want to put myself in that kind of situation. I just want to say something again to repeat what Ayesha said. The military is a very powerful institution. They have the guns. They have a monopoly on violence. It will be very difficult for civil society to confront them on their terms. They wouldn't mind that, since they have all the guns. They can be compromised, I believe, by a wide-scale civil society movement, a popular uprising, if you will, as we've seen in other non-violent revolutions. I think violence would play right to their trump card, right to their strength, because of the amount of power that they have.
So this is also a misperception that the military is about to get divided, and that there is a faction of mullahs, mad mullahs within who are going to take over. I don't see that happening, at least not in my lifetime. See, the problem is that it's a very painful strategic option that Pakistan has adopted of nourishing militants, jihadis, non-state actors in pursuit of national security objectives. It has happened, it has been happening, it continues to happen. Of course, it affects people who come in contact with these characters. But I do not see a part of a huge chunk of military getting out of control. That is not what one sees happening. There are tensions, and those tensions are partly because 21% of the military also comes from the frontier province, they're Pashto. And once your sense is, not just the militaries but the entire societies, that you're fighting an outsider's war, it creates tensions. it creates pressures on you, on how you define your objective and how faithful you are in fighting the war that you are fighting.